8 heavily armed pickup trucks drove out of the village of Tongo Tango in Niger, West Africa, on October 4, 2017. The convoy included several African soldiers and U.S. Special Forces searching for a high-ranking local leader named Dudu Shefu. Shortly after, the Special Forces were ambushed and turned into the hunters themselves. The tragic events, in which the Green Berets fought for their own lives, became known as the deadly Tongo Tango ambush. Soldiers fight for their lives. The rear vehicles of the convoy were fired upon by an opponent who was well prepared as soon as it departed the settlement. Ambush. The fire was weak at first but picked up steam as they approached a little forest. The soldiers stopped and dismounted under the cover of gunfire to confront the attackers. After forming a squad with 4 Nigerian soldiers, the Green Beret team leader engaged the enemy forces and neutralized 4 insurgents. Once the threat was neutralized, they observed something much more concerning about the gunmen they had just engaged. They were only the tip of the enemy forces behind them. About 100 additional adversaries were moving forward on motorbikes and pickup trucks that were fitted with heavy weaponry such as mortars and machine guns. When the team leader realized there was danger, he ran back to the convoy and gave the order for his soldiers to evacuate as soon as possible. However, because most of the forces were dispersed, the evasion was chaotic and took longer than expected. As a result, 3 Green Berets who had previously assisted their friends in their withdrawal found themselves unexpectedly alone on the battlefield. Brian Black, Johnson Jeremiah, and Wright Dustin. Following the principle of fire and move, the 3 special forces attempted to disengage from the enemy, but the enemy fighters were too fast and too numerous despite the Green Berets' accurate defensive fire. They were getting closer and closer, and every yard gained allowed the enemy to engage the special forces even more effectively. The special forces now faced nearly 100 enemies. Brian Black was the first soldier to be hit as he ran alongside the rolling vehicle to provide cover and fire for his comrades. He died instantly. Johnson and Wright returned fire before pulling Black into cover behind the vehicle. But as the enemies got closer, both realized they would be overrun at any moment. Within seconds, they made the difficult decision to leave their fallen comrade behind and ran for their lives in the open steppe. They initially managed to escape the hail of enemy bullets, but soon Johnson was hit and fell to the dusty ground. Wright turned and saw Johnson badly wounded lying on the ground with bullets hitting all around him. He had a chance to escape and perhaps save his life, but decided not to leave his brother to the insurgents. He then ran back and defended Johnson until he too was hit and went down badly wounded. According to the Geneva Conventions, wounded and obviously incapacitated or under protection must be cared for. In the video footage, because the IS fighters did not abide by the Geneva Convention or give a damn about the human cost of war, Johnson was rendered practically motionless on the ground and was unable to raise a weapon. They approached the 2 seriously injured guys and executed them with many close-range bullets. The 4th American soldier to die in the Tongo Tango ambush was Staff Sergeant David Johnson, who was part of the African and American soldiers who were able to disengage from the enemy in time and take up positions approximately 700 yards south of the attack site. Johnson fights to the end when the gang realized they had left 3 allies behind. David Johnson, the team mechanic, attempted to get in touch with the squad. By radio, however, to no avail. Finally, 4 Green Berets volunteered to run back to the dangerous battlefield to search for the soldiers after the rescue squad set off. The forces that had just escaped were shot at again. Johnson returned fire with one of the mounted machine guns on the vehicles. When ammunition ran out, he continued to engage the enemy with his sniper rifle. However, as the group was threatened to be surrounded by the enemy again, the team leader had to order an evasion maneuver for the second time. The vehicles began moving and sped away at top speed to escape the hail of enemy bullets. In the process, they left Johnson and 2 of the African soldiers behind, assuming they would join the convoy in a moment. However, enemy fire became so intense that Johnson was unable to enter his truck, which had its driver's side facing the enemy. As the insurgents came closer, the 3 soldiers had no choice but to escape on foot across the savannah. They ran as fast as they could. The enemies reached the empty pickup truck, recognized the fleeing soldiers, and immediately pursued with their vehicles. The African soldiers advanced around 400 yards before being apprehended and then slain. The mechanic, David Johnson, had only his assault rifle and no heavy weapons. He had no radio or phone contact with his comrades. Despite this, the family man did not give up and kept firing back, fiercely fighting off numerous enemies and keeping them at bay for the most part. David Johnson had tremendous stamina thanks to his excellent training, and he managed to run almost a mile from the enemy before making his final stand at a small bush. Johnson died alone with a gun in his hand and suffered a total of 18 gunshot wounds. It took 2 days to find and recover his body. The lively soldier left behind his pregnant wife, a daughter, and a son. It wasn't until the Islamists approached within 100 yards in an armed vehicle that they were able to take Johnson out. Those in charge give up all hope. During the Tongo Tango ambush, Michael Perazzetti and Brett Bartles led the African soldiers alongside their American comrades. Before the ambush, the soldiers had voiced concerns about the operation due to their lack of heavy weapons and air support, as well as their extended deployment. Despite this, higher leadership encouraged them to continue searching for the leader after the Green Berets and their allies came under fire and had to flee twice to avoid being trapped by the enemy. Despite this, they were still being pursued by a sizable number of heavily armed Islamists. 5 of the mounted men were wounded by gunshots during the pursuit, which saw the majority of the African forces flee. They were now 7 to a vehicle that was being closely followed by several hostile trucks. The Special Forces team leader was struck so forcefully that he fell off the truck bed, and the team had to turn around to recover him. The enemy forces not only outnumbered them, but also had motorcycles, armed vehicles, and mortars with which they now attacked the American team leaders and their remaining allies. The Special Forces were surrounded from almost all sides and sent out a final radio message saying they were soon to be overrun. They then destroyed the radios and other sensitive information and said goodbye. 1 African soldier was killed. The driver received an elbow wound, but chose to ignore it and continued driving. Perazzetti attempted to send messages for assistance via the military version of a messenger, but they were not answered. In his frantic texts, he said, among other things, "We need help now or we aren't going to make it to." Other special forces stationed in Africa learned of their comrades' desperate circumstances and frantically begged their leaders for permission to assist. One group of Green Berets even boarded a helicopter without waiting for orders to fly to the attack site, but was forced to turn around. Tango is a bad village. After almost an hour, only 1 French commando and air support arrived at the scene where the survivors were rescued. Outcome and awards during the Tango in the ambush. 4 Green Berets, 4 African soldiers, and a military interpreter were all slain for their extraordinary bravery and teamwork even in the face of impending death. All of the deceased were given medals of valor. African troops also got awards. Dustin Wright and David Johnson were given the Silver Star posthumously, while Brian Black and Jeremiah Johnson were given the Bronze Star. For their bravery during the ambush, 2 Nigerians were awarded Bronze Stars. The first soldier helped with the flanking maneuver that successfully caught the terrorists, and the second Nigerian willingly came under friendly fire to warn his fellow countrymen of their error. Several thousand people showed up for the fallen soldier's funeral, a fraternity that is incomprehensible to others. Thanks for watching. Kindly like and subscribe for more videos. In the comments section below, please tell me how many you discovered.